The sound of expensive scissors slicing through silk echoed through the empty art room as Brooklyn Hayes watched in horror while Jackson Mitchell destroyed her prom dress. "You really thought you were too good for me," he snarled, holding up a strip of ruined fabric like a trophy, while his friends filmed everything on their phones. What none of them noticed was the tiny red light blinking on her smart watch, already transmitting everything to the one person who could end their privileged lives with a single phone call. In exactly 12 minutes. The most powerful law enforcement officer in America would walk through those doors. And the golden boy, who'd never heard no in his life, would learn what real consequences looked like. But before I tell you what happened next, if stories like this move you, if you believe bullies should face justice and victims deserve to be heard, please take a moment to hit that like button. Your comments mean the world to me. Share your own experiences or thoughts below. And if you want to help me continue bringing these powerful stories to light, stories that give hope to those who feel powerless, consider hitting the thanks button beneath this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me create more content that might reach someone who desperately needs to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being part of this community that stands against injustice. Now, let me tell you how one quiet girl's worst day became the moment everything changed. Brooklyn pressed herself against the paint-stained table, watching pieces of her dress flutter to the floor like dying butterflies. The emerald silk she'd saved for 6 months to buy. Working double shifts at the bookstore every weekend, was being methodically destroyed by hands that had never known a day of work in their lives. Jackson Mitchell stood before her, 6 feet 2 inches of entitled rage wrapped in a $2,000 suit. His perfect jaw clenched with the fury of someone discovering the world didn't revolve around him. "I asked you nicely," Jackson continued, each word dripping with venom. "I sent flowers. I had the yearbook committee vote you most likely to be my prom date. Hell, I even got my dad to donate a new computer lab just so you'd notice me. And you said no." The scissors flashed again. Another piece of her dream fell away. Brooklyn's fingers found the edge of her smart watch, pressing the emergency sequence her uncle had programmed. 3 taps, hold, release. The signal that meant she needed help immediately. The same signal that would activate every recording function and GPS tracker in the device, creating an evidence trail that would hold up in any court in the country. "Please, stop," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded in the cavernous art room. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced above the destruction of her prom dreams. The smell of acrylic paint and teenage cruelty mixed in the air. "Please," Hunter Caldwell laughed from his position by the door. Standing guard like this was some kind of military operation. His father owned 3 country clubs and a chain of luxury hotels. But apparently, that wasn't enough to buy his son basic human decency. "She's begging now. Jackson, maybe she's finally learning her place." Mason Roberts leaned against the kiln, his phone held high to capture every angle. The red recording light on his latest iPhone matched the one secretly blinking on Brooklyn's wrist. "This is even better than when we got that scholarship kid to drop out last year," he said. "At least this one's actually hot. Makes the rejection sting more, doesn't it? Jax." The nickname made Jackson's eye twitch. Only his inner circle called him Jax, the boys who'd grown up alongside him in gated communities where the biggest concern was which Ivy League school would accept their generous donations. Brooklyn had committed the unforgivable sin of disrupting their careful social hierarchy. She was supposed to be grateful for his attention, not politely decline with a soft, "I'm sorry, but I already have other plans for prom." Other plans. The words had echoed through the senior hallway like a gunshot when she'd said them 3 days ago. Jackson Mitchell, heir to Mitchell Industries, captain of the lacrosse team, owner of a jawline that could cut glass, and a trust fund that could buy small countries, had been rejected by the quiet girl who spent her lunches in the library. "You know what your problem is," Jackson said, moving closer until she could smell his cologne, something expensive and overwhelming, like everything else about him. "You think you're special. You walk around here with your nose in a book, acting like you're too good for everyone. But you're not special. Brooklyn, you're just another girl in a school full of girls who would kill for my attention." "Then ask one of them," Brooklyn said quietly, finding a spark of defiance despite the tears threatening to spill. "I'm sure they'd love to be your accessory for the night." The room went silent except for the whisper of silk being cut. Jackson's face darkened, transforming his magazine cover features into something ugly and dangerous. "Accessory. You think that's what this is about?" He grabbed another section of the dress, the bodice she'd spent hours altering to fit perfectly. "This is about respect. This is about understanding the natural order of things. My family built the wing you're standing in. My mother's on the board of trustees. My father golfs with the superintendent every Sunday. And you're nobody. A pretty nobody who forgot her place." The scissors bit deep, severing the delicate straps that would have held the dress on her shoulders. Each cut felt personal, targeted, like he was trying to slice away her dignity along with the fabric. Aidan Walsh, the fourth member of their group, shifted uncomfortably by the window. Unlike the others, he seemed to have retained some vestige of conscience. "Jackson, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Aidan." Jackson snapped without looking away from his destruction. "You were happy enough to take the bet. Don't go soft now just because you're losing." The bet. Of course there was a bet. Brooklyn felt her stomach turn as the pieces clicked into place. The sudden interest from multiple boys in their social circle. The elaborate promposals that had started appearing at her locker. The way they'd competed for her attention like she was a prize at a carnival. "How much?" she asked, her voice stronger now. "How much was I worth in your little game?" Mason laughed. $5,000 each. Winner takes all." Jackson was so sure he had it in the bag. Guess that's 20,000 reasons why he's pissed. $20,000. To them, it was pocket change. To her, it was more than her mother made in 6 months of cleaning houses, including theirs. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same hands that scrubbed their marble floors had helped her save for a dress now lying in pieces at her feet. "But it was never about the money," Hunter added with a smirk. "It was about proving Jackson could get any girl he wanted. His reputation's been riding on this for weeks. The whole senior class has been watching." Brooklyn understood now. This wasn't about rejection or even wounded pride. This was about power and the threat she posed to it simply by existing outside their carefully constructed social order. By saying no, she'd revealed that their money and status weren't the universal currency they believed it to be. "You cost me more than money," Jackson said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. "You cost me my reputation. Do you know what people are saying? That Jackson Mitchell got turned down by some nobody who thinks she's too good for prom. That I'm losing my touch. That maybe I'm not the king of this school anymore." He held up the remaining fabric of her dress, examining it like a general surveying a conquered territory. This piece of trash probably cost you, what, $100? From some discount store? 300, Brooklyn whispered. 6 months of saving. The confession seemed to delight him. 6 months, Jesus! That's pathetic. I spend more than that on lunch, but you know what, I'm doing you a favor. This dress was all wrong for you anyway. Too fancy. Too aspirational. You're not Cinderella. Brooklyn. There's no prince coming to save you. The watch on her wrist vibrated once. A response. Help was coming. She just had to survive until it arrived. We should probably wrap this up, Aiden said, glancing nervously at his phone. Practice starts in 20 minutes. We've got time, Jackson said. But Brooklyn noticed his hands had started to shake slightly, the adrenaline of cruelty beginning to fade, leaving behind the first hints of uncertainty. Besides, we're not done here. She needs to understand what happens when you embarrass a Mitchell in public. He picked up a jar of red paint from the nearby table, one of the supplies for the senior mural project. The lid came off with a wet pop that seemed to echo in the suddenly tense room. Even Mason lowered his phone, understanding that they were crossing from cruel prank into something darker. Jackson, Hunter warned, but it was too late. The paint arced through the air in slow motion, a crimson wave that crashed over Brooklyn's hair and shoulders. It ran down her face like blood, staining her white blouse and pooling at her feet among the remains of her dress. The smell was overwhelming, chemical and harsh, making her eyes water beyond the tears already threatening to fall. Now, you look like you feel, Jackson said with satisfaction. Like garbage. Brooklyn stood there, paint dripping, dress destroyed, dignity in tatters, but something in her posture, some quality of stillness, made the boys shift nervously. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming or begging or doing any of the things they'd expected. She just stood there, red paint running down her face like war paint, and smiled. "What are you smiling about?" Mason asked, his bravado cracking slightly. "You'll see," Brooklyn said softly. "You'll all see." The door to the art room exploded open with such force that it bounced off the wall. 4 men in dark suits entered first, hands near weapons, eyes scanning for threats. But it was the 5th man who made the blood drain from every face in the room. Deputy Director Samuel Hayes of the FBI stood in the doorway like an avenging angel in a perfectly pressed suit. His eyes, the same green as Brooklyn's, but holding none of her gentleness, took in the scene with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent 30 years analyzing crime scenes. The destroyed dress, the paint-covered girl, the 4 boys who suddenly looked very young and very afraid. "Uncle Sam," Brooklyn said quietly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jackson's scissors clattered to the floor. The sound was oddly final, like a gavel coming down on their futures. Mason's phone slipped from nerveless fingers, the screen cracking on impact. Hunter took an involuntary step backward, bumping into Aiden, who looked like he might be sick. "Gentlemen," Deputy Director Hayes said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown criminals confess to crimes they hadn't committed. "I believe you've met my niece." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, they could hear the sound of more vehicles arriving. The cavalry called by a single emergency signal from a smart watch that had captured everything in high definition, complete with audio clear enough to play in a courtroom. "Sir?" Jackson started, his voice cracking like a pubescent boy's. "This isn't... We were just... Just what?" "Mr. Mitchell." Hayes stepped into the room, and his security details spread out behind him like wings of judgment. Just destroying private property, just assaulting a young woman, just creating video evidence of multiple federal crimes. Federal crimes, Hunter squeaked. Hayes smiled, but it was the smile of a predator recognizing prey. Oh yes, you see, that smart watch you've been performing for its FBI property. Experimental tech from our cybercrimes division, which means you've been interfering with federal equipment. Add in the assault, the harassment, the conspiracy to commit fraud with your little betting ring, and the fact that you filmed it all. Well, gentlemen, you've just created the kind of case file that makes prosecutors weep with joy. Brooklyn watched as the reality of their situation crashed over the boys like the paint they'd thrown at her. These weren't just school disciplinary actions they were facing. This wasn't something their parents could make disappear with a donation or a phone call to the right person. They'd assaulted the niece of one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country, and they'd done it on camera. "My dad will, Jackson started. "Your father will do nothing," Hayes interrupted. "In fact, Mitchell Industries is currently under federal investigation for tax evasion and wire fraud. Did you think we didn't know about your family's creative accounting? We've been building a case for months. Your little stunt here just gave us probable cause to expedite things." The door opened again, and Principal Edwards rushed in, followed by school security and what looked like half the administrative staff. His face went from confused to horrified as he took in the scene. "Deputy Director Hayes," he stammered, "I had no idea Brooklyn was your—" "That's the problem, isn't it?" Hayes said coldly. "It shouldn't matter who her family is. She should have been protected because she's a student at your school. Instead, she's been systematically harassed for the crime of declining a date. And where were you?" Brooklyn pulled the emergency blanket one of the agents offered around her shoulders, covering the worst of the paint damage. She caught Jackson's eye and saw the exact moment he understood that his life as he knew it was over. No more lacrosse scholarship to Princeton. No more guaranteed position at his father's company. No more assumption that the world would bend to accommodate his wishes. "Brooklyn," Aiden said suddenly, desperately. "I tried to stop them. You heard me. I said we should stop." She looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You stood there and watched. That makes you just as guilty as the rest of them." "Phones," Hayes ordered, and his agents moved efficiently to collect the devices from the boys' unresisting hands. "We'll be analyzing everything. Every message, every photo, every communication about this bet of yours. And trust me, we will find it all." Mason started to cry, actual tears streaming down his face as the reality of cyber forensics hit him. Every deleted text, every Snapchat they thought had disappeared, every private message mocking Brooklyn or planning their harassment. It would all come to light. "Please," Hunter begged. "It was just a prank. We didn't mean—" "You mean you didn't mean to get caught," Brooklyn said, finding her voice at last. Paint dripped from her hair onto the destroyed silk at her feet. "You meant every second of this. You planned it. You executed it. And you enjoyed it. The only thing you didn't plan for was consequences." Hayes put a protective hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready to go? We need to get you cleaned up and document your injuries for the investigation." "Injuries," Jackson said. "We didn't touch her." "Psychological trauma is injury, Mr. Mitchell. Destruction of property is injury. Assault with a chemical substance." He gestured to the paint. "That's definitely injury. My niece will be pressing full charges, and I assure you, the federal prosecutor assigned to this case doesn't lose." as Brooklyn walked toward the door, escorted by her uncle and his team. She turned back one last time. 4 boys stood among the wreckage of their arrogance, their futures as ruined as the dress at their feet. "You were wrong about one thing," she said quietly. "I did have a prince coming to save me. He just carries a badge instead of a sword." The last thing she saw before the door closed was Jackson Mitchell, the golden boy who'd never heard no, sinking to his knees in a puddle of red paint, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. As they walked down the hallway, Brooklyn could already hear the whispers starting. Students peering out of classrooms, phones appearing despite the no-device policy. The story already beginning to spread like wildfire through social media. By tomorrow, everyone would know what happened in the art room. But more importantly, everyone would know what happened to those who thought their money and status put them above consequences. "Are you okay?" her uncle asked once they were outside, away from prying eyes and eager cameras. Brooklyn looked down at her paint-stained clothes and destroyed dreams of a perfect prom night. Then she looked at the smart watch on her wrist, its small screen showing the files already uploaded to secure FBI servers. Evidence that would ensure justice for not just her, but for every student these boys had tormented over the years. "I will be," she said, and for the first time in weeks, she actually believed it. The FBI field office in downtown Denver had seen many criminals pass through its sterile interrogation rooms, but never 4 terrified 18-year-olds in private school blazers. Brooklyn watched through the one-way glass as Jackson Mitchell sat alone at the metal table. His perfect hair now disheveled, his designer suit jacket removed to reveal a white shirt stained with nervous sweat. The golden boy who'd destroyed her dress 3 hours ago looked very young and very afraid. "You don't have to watch this," Deputy Director Hayes said softly, standing beside his niece. "We have everything we need from your statement and the watch recording." Brooklyn pulled the FBI windbreaker someone had given her tighter around her shoulders. They'd let her shower in the employee facilities, but she could still smell paint in her hair, despite 3 washes. "I want to see this through," she said. "They humiliated me in front of everyone. I need to see them face consequences." Through the speaker, they could hear Special Agent Rivera beginning the interview. "Mr. Mitchell, do you understand why you're here?" Jackson's attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who'd arrived within 30 minutes of his detention, placed a warning hand on his arm. "My client understands he's being questioned about an incident at school. However, we dispute the characterization of this as a federal matter." Agent Rivera smiled thinly. "Your client assaulted the niece of a federal official while she was wearing experimental FBI technology. He destroyed property while conspiring with others to commit fraud through an illegal gambling ring. And, most importantly, he created video evidence of targeted harassment that crossed state lines when it was uploaded to social media servers in California. Would you like me to continue listing the federal crimes? Or shall we discuss cooperation? In the adjacent rooms, similar scenes played out. Mason Roberts had broken down completely, sobbing about his Stanford early admission that would surely be revoked. Hunter Caldwell kept demanding his father's entire legal team, not understanding that even the best lawyers couldn't erase video evidence. Aidan Walsh, the one who'd shown a moment of conscience, was already detailing everyone involved in the betting ring, trying desperately to minimize his own involvement. Brooklyn's phone buzzed, her mother calling for the 10th time. She'd already spoken to her, explained that she was safe, that Uncle Sam was handling everything. But she knew her mother wouldn't relax until she was home. The same mother who'd worked extra shifts to help pay for the destroyed dress, who'd been so proud when Brooklyn showed her the elegant green silk, The media is already picking this up, Uncle Sam said, scrolling through his tablet. Someone leaked the initial video. It's trending on Twitter. #prom dress destruction. Brooklyn winced. She hadn't wanted this to go public. But in the age of smartphones and social media, privacy was an illusion. How bad is it? See for yourself. He handed her the tablet. The video was everywhere. Mason's recording of the dress destruction, the paint throwing, the cruel laughter. It had all been preserved in high definition. But what struck Brooklyn most were the comments, thousands of them, expressing outrage, sharing their own stories of bullying, calling for justice. Her humiliation had become a rallying cry. "Channel 7 wants an interview," her uncle said. "CNN has called twice. The Today Show left 3 messages." "I don't want to be famous for being a victim," Brooklyn said quietly. "You're not a victim. You're a survivor. And your story might help others find the courage to speak up." Through the glass, Jackson's lawyer was reviewing the charges. Federal destruction of property, cyber harassment, conspiracy to commit fraud, assault with a harmful substance. The list went on. Each charge carried potential jail time, fines, and most importantly, for someone like Jackson, a criminal record that would follow him forever. "My client was engaged in what he believed to be harmless teenage pranking," the lawyer said, though even she didn't sound convinced. Agent Rivera pulled out printed screenshots. "Harmless? Let me read some of your client's text messages. Quote, 'That stuck-up bitch is going to learn her place. Can't wait to see her face when we destroy her pathetic dress. Maybe after this she'll understand she's nothing.' End quote. Does that sound harmless to you?" Jackson's face had gone gray. In the other rooms, similar revelations were destroying any defense the boys might have mounted. Their digital arrogance had created an unassailable trail of evidence. Brooklyn's phone rang. An unknown number with a local area code. Against her better judgment, she answered. "You've ruined everything." The voice was female, older, dripping with venom. "Do you have any idea what you've done to our families?" Mrs. Mitchell, Brooklyn guessed. "My husband's company is already losing contracts. 3 major clients called to cancel within the last hour. The country club is considering revoking our membership. Jackson's Princeton acceptance will certainly be withdrawn. All because you couldn't just accept a date to prom like a normal girl." The audacity took Brooklyn's breath away. "Your son destroyed my property and assaulted me." "It was a dress," Mrs. Mitchell screamed. "A cheap, worthless dress. And now you're destroying lives over fabric." "No," Brooklyn said, finding strength she didn't know she had. "Your son destroyed lives over his ego. I just refused to be another casualty." She hung up and blocked the number. But Mrs. Mitchell's call was just the beginning. Over the next 2 hours, Brooklyn's phone became a battlefield. Parents, relatives, friends of the families, all calling to beg, threaten, or negotiate. She turned the phone off eventually, but not before screenshots of the threatening messages were added to the FBI's evidence file. By 6 p.m., the story had gone national. FBI officials' niece targeted in shocking prom dress destruction ran on every major news site. The video had millions of views. Jackson Mitchell's perfectly photographed face was now synonymous with privileged cruelty. Corporate sponsors began distancing themselves from his father's company. Princeton released a statement about their zero-tolerance policy for bullying and harassment. Sir Peyton Roberts' mother appeared on local news, trying to do damage control. It backfired spectacularly when the reporter asked about the $20,000 betting ring her son had participated in. Hunter Caldwell's father, who'd built his hotel empire on family values, watched his stock prices tumble as the story spread. Aidan Walsh's parents simply disappeared, rumored to have left for their house in Aspen to avoid the media circus. Brooklyn sat in her uncle's office, watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. Part of her felt guilty for the collateral damage. Another part, the part that remembered standing covered in paint while they laughed, felt only cold satisfaction. "The prosecutor wants to offer them a deal," Uncle Sam said, entering with fresh coffee. "Guilty pleas to reduced charges, community service, probation, mandatory counseling, no jail time. What do you think I should do?" He sat beside her, the fearsome deputy director becoming just her uncle who'd taught her to ride a bike and checked for monsters under her bed. "I think you should do what feels right for you. Not for revenge, not for appearances, but for your own peace of mind." Brooklyn thought about Jackson's face when he'd cut her dress. The casual cruelty of someone who'd never considered that other people had feelings worth respecting. Then she thought about all the other students who'd been too afraid to stand up to him and his crew. "I want the full charges to stand," she said, "but I'll agree to alternative sentencing if they meet certain conditions, such as public apology, not some lawyer-written statement, but them actually standing up and admitting what they did. Community service specifically focused on anti-bullying programs, and they have to pay for therapy for any student who comes forward as having been harassed by them." Her uncle smiled proudly. "You would make a good prosecutor. I'll relay your terms." By 8 p.m., all 4 boys had agreed. They had no choice. The alternative was federal prosecution and the very real possibility of jail time. Their parents' lawyers had made the calculation clear: take the deal or risk everything. The next morning, Westfield Academy's auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Media vans lined the parking lot. Parents who'd never attended a school assembly suddenly found urgent reasons to be there. Brooklyn sat in the front row, wearing a simple blue dress her mother had bought her the night before. "For your courage," her mother had said, tears in her eyes. Principal Edwards took the podium first, his usual smooth demeanor cracked with stress. "Yesterday, an incident occurred at our school that has forced us to confront some hard truths about our culture and values." He spoke about failure, about blindness to bullying, about the toxic environment that wealth and privilege had created. He announced new policies, new oversight, a complete overhaul of the disciplinary system. But everyone was waiting for the main event. Jackson Mitchell walked onto the stage like a man approaching his execution. Gone was the swagger, the smirk, the casual arrogance. He looked at the podium, at the microphone, at anything but the crowd. "My name is Jackson Mitchell," he began, his voice barely audible. "And I'm a bully." The words hung in the air like a confession at an AA meeting. He continued, detailing his actions, admitting to the betting ring, to the systematic harassment of scholarship students, to the destruction of Brooklyn's dress. His voice cracked when he spoke her name, when he finally looked at her and said the words the lawyers hadn't scripted. "I'm sorry, Brooklyn. I targeted you because you made me feel small by saying no. I couldn't handle rejection, so I tried to destroy you. There's no excuse for what I did. I was raised better than this, but I chose to be cruel because I could, because I thought my family's money made me untouchable. I was wrong." Mason Roberts followed. Then Hunter Caldwell. Then Aidan Walsh. Each confession built on the last, revealing a pattern of abuse that went back years. Names were named. incidents detailed. By the end, 17 other students had been identified as victims of their harassment. The media had a field day. Silver Spoon Bullies Brought to Justice ran in the Washington Post. The New York Times published an op-ed about privilege and accountability in elite schools. The video of their confessions went even more viral than the original harassment footage. Within a week, Mitchell Industries had lost 40% of its value. 3 board members resigned. Jackson's father was forced to step down as CEO to try to salvage what was left. The Roberts family's investment firm faced an exodus of clients. The Caldwell Hotel chain implemented desperate rebranding efforts. The Walsh family simply retreated from public life entirely. But in the midst of the chaos, something beautiful happened. Students began speaking up, not just at Westfield, but at private schools across the country. The hashtag #NoMoreBullies began trending, with thousands sharing their stories. Brooklyn received hundreds of messages from kids who'd found courage in her stand. 2 weeks later, Brooklyn stood in a different dress shop, this time accompanied by Aisha Patel and Lily Chen, 2 girls who'd reached out after seeing her story, sharing their own experiences with Jackson's crew. They'd become friends, bonded by survival and determination. "This one," Aisha said, holding up a midnight blue gown with silver accents. "It's perfect." "I don't know if I even want to go to prom anymore," Brooklyn admitted. The thought of walking into that gymnasium, being stared at, whispered about, made her stomach clench. "Then we'll go together," Lily said firmly. "All 3 of us. Show them that we're not afraid anymore." Her uncle had offered to buy her any dress she wanted, but Brooklyn had politely declined. She'd saved up again, working extra shifts, determined to buy her own dress with her own money. This time, though, she had friends to shop with. The night of prom. Brooklyn stood before her mirror in the blue gown. It wasn't the emerald silk she'd originally dreamed of, but somehow it was better. This dress represented resilience, friendship, and the courage to stand up again after being knocked down. Her uncle knocked on her door. "Your chariot awaits," he said with a smile. He'd insisted on arranging transportation, not a limo, which would have been too much, but a nice town car with a professional driver. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the ride. "I'm proud of you, Brooklyn. Not for standing up to them, though that took guts. I'm proud that you didn't let them break you, that you found a way to turn your pain into purpose." At the hotel where prom was being held, Brooklyn saw the changes immediately. Security was tighter. Chaperones were actually present and paying attention. A large banner read, "Respect and Dignity for All," part of Westfield's new initiative. She walked in with Aisha and Lily, their arms linked, heads high. The room didn't go silent like in a movie. Life wasn't that dramatic. But there were looks, whispers, some supportive smiles. A few students even applauded, quickly hushed but genuine in their support. "Brooklyn." She turned to see David Kim, the quiet boy from her AP literature class. He was standing with a group of other students she recognized, the scholarship kids, the ones who'd always existed on the margins of Westfield's social hierarchy. "We wanted to thank you," David said. "What you did, and it changed everything. Jackson and his crew made our lives hell for years. We never thought anyone could stop them." As the night progressed, Brooklyn found herself surrounded not by the popular crowd, but by something better, genuine friends who understood struggle and appreciated strength. They danced badly to good music, laughed at inside jokes, and created the kind of memories that actually mattered. Near midnight, Principal Edwards approached her. "Miss Hayes, could I have a word?" They stepped out onto the balcony, where the Denver skyline glittered in the distance. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I failed you and many other students. I was so focused on keeping donors happy that I forgot my real job, protecting the kids in my care." "What's done is done," Brooklyn said. "What matters is what happens next." "Indeed, which is why I wanted to tell you personally. We've established the Brooklyn Hayes Courage Scholarship, full ride for one student each year who demonstrates exceptional character in the face of adversity. The funding is coming from the fines levied against the 4 boys and their families." Brooklyn felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help us choose the recipients. Your voice, your experience. It matters." As she stood there, looking out at the city lights, Brooklyn thought about the girl who'd stood frozen in an art room while her dress was destroyed. That girl had felt powerless, voiceless, alone. But she'd had something those boys hadn't counted on: the courage to press 3 buttons on a watch and ask for help. Her phone buzzed. A text from her uncle. "Hope you're having fun. Remember, you're not Cinderella. You're the one who saved yourself." She smiled, thinking of Jackson Mitchell, who was spending his prom night beginning 500 hours of community service at a youth detention center, of Mason Roberts, whose Instagram account now consisted solely of anti-bullying resources, of Hunter Caldwell, who had been court-ordered to attend therapy to address his issues with entitlement and aggression, of Aidan Walsh, who'd actually sent her a genuine letter of apology, not required by any court, expressing real remorse and a commitment to change. "Ready to go back in?" Aisha asked, appearing at her elbow. "They're about to announce prom court." Brooklyn laughed. "After everything that's happened, you think I care about prom court?" But when her name was called as prom queen, elected by write-in votes from students who'd been inspired by her courage, she accepted the crown with grace, not because she needed the validation, but because it meant something had fundamentally shifted at Westfield Academy. Standing on that stage, looking out at her classmates, Brooklyn spoke without prepared remarks. "This crown doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's ever been bullied, harassed, or made to feel less than. To everyone who's been told they don't belong. You do belong. Your voice matters. And if someone tries to silence you, remember, you're not alone anymore." The applause was thunderous, genuine, and lasting in the crowd. She spotted the empty spaces where Jackson and his crew would have stood, their absence more powerful than their presence had ever been. Later, as the town car drove her home through the quiet Denver streets, Brooklyn reflected on the wild journey from that horrible afternoon to this moment of triumph. Her dress had been destroyed, but from those pieces, something stronger had been built. A movement, a community, a promise that no one should suffer in silence. And Brooklyn Hayes. She'd discovered that the real power wasn't in designer dresses or social status or even having an FBI deputy director for an uncle. Real power was in standing up after being knocked down, in refusing to be silenced, in turning personal pain into collective progress. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The legal proceedings would continue. The media attention would eventually fade. Life would go on. But tonight, she was just a girl who'd gone to prom in a dress she'd bought with her own money, surrounded by real friends, wearing a crown that represented not popularity but courage. And that was more than enough. And Brooklyn Hayes. She'd discovered that the real power wasn't in designer dresses that cost thousands of dollars or social status carefully cultivated through generations. or even having an FBI deputy director for an uncle who could make phone calls that changed everything. Real power was in standing up after being knocked down, in refusing to be silenced when everyone expected you to disappear, in turning personal pain into collective progress that lifted others up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She knew. The legal proceedings would continue for months, maybe years. The media attention would eventually fade as new stories captured the public's interest. Life would go on, as it always does. But tonight, on this magical spring evening, she was just a 17-year-old girl who'd gone to prom in a dress she'd bought with her own money, earned from tutoring younger students in math. She was surrounded by real friends who loved her for her courage, not her connections. She wore a crown that represented not popularity or beauty, but bravery in the face of cruelty. And that, all of that, was more than enough. It was everything. As the town car pulled into her driveway, Brooklyn noticed the porch light was on, her mother waiting up, as always. Through the window, she could see her mom's silhouette, probably pacing with worry, despite Brooklyn's texts throughout the night, assuring her everything was fine. More than fine. Actually, miraculous. Her phone buzzed with messages from the group chat her real friends had created, photos from the night. Plans for a celebration breakfast tomorrow. Words of love and support that made her eyes well up again. These weren't the superficial "OMG, you look so cute" messages she used to crave from the popular crowd. These were deep, meaningful connections forged in the fire of shared struggle. "Miss Brooklyn," the driver said gently, "we've arrived." She thanked him and stepped out into the cool Colorado night, her prom queen crown still perched on her head. The same driveway where she'd once rushed inside to hide from the world now felt like a stage for her triumph. Every step was deliberate, confident, the walk of someone who'd been broken down to nothing and rebuilt herself stronger. Her mother flung open the door before Brooklyn could reach for the handle. "My brave girl," she whispered, pulling her into a fierce hug that said everything words couldn't express. They'd been through hell together, the police interviews, the social media harassment, the sleepless nights when Brooklyn wondered if fighting back was worth it. "I'm okay, Mom," Brooklyn said, and for the first time in months, she truly meant it. "I'm actually okay." They sat on the porch swing, the crown placed carefully between them, and watched the stars that seemed especially bright tonight. Tomorrow, the fight would continue, but tonight belonged to healing, to hope, to the knowledge that one voice raised in truth could inspire hundreds more. The girl who'd been destroyed in a boutique had risen as a queen, not a queen of popularity or privilege, but something far more powerful, a queen of courage, a beacon for everyone who'd ever felt powerless. And that transformation, Brooklyn knew, was the greatest victory of all.